Hi everyone, I'm Oscar. I'm a solutions engineer over at Encord, and today we're going to be discussing all things generative AI evaluations. So before we crack in to the session, what I'm going to do is just give a bit of context of some of the people that we work with at Encord and kind of what we do, to then sort of frame some of the use cases that we're then going to talk about. So we work with a pretty wide range of customers split across different verticals, a lot of whom now are building out generative applications, some of them on the kind of foundation model side, some of them on specific application layers. And all of them, when they are looking to deploy code in the real world that is doing something real, and humans are interacting with those models, they are leveraging human evaluations to basically make the most of that model and make sure that it is aligned to the purpose of their use case. So that's why today we're going to discuss the importance of evaluations when we are thinking about generative models, and then why, also how we can build a good rubric for a human evaluation framework, and then some of the examples that we've seen and can perform in the Encord platform. Excellent. So to start off with, why evaluation is such a key part of building out a GenAI application. So you can see a bunch of examples here, and maybe we can add some kind of color to these with some real-world applications. So model alignment, if we take the maybe most intuitive generative AI use case, if we think about somebody building out a chatbot for a customer to interact with, we can say making sure that that chatbot is able to do what I want it to do, give the customer helpful information, and all of those pieces. And we'll discuss traditional evaluation metrics in a moment, but if you can think about some ways of, when you fill out one of those forms, did we help with your query today, yes or no, right? That might be a simple type of eval, but however, was it helpful? Was it a pleasant experience? Did you feel, oh no, I wish I could just like phone somebody and get my phone bill sorted in that way? Then there is the case of risk identification, and then that kind of interacts with safety and security and those pieces too. One of the other cases that we see is red teaming, and so when people are maliciously leveraging our models, are we able to get information that as a company, I wouldn't want my model providing, or promising a customer something that I'm not going to deliver. And in the same sense, making sure that these are secure and robust. Then on the actual performance and fine-tuning side, then we also see that customers are leveraging high-quality evaluations, and there's that the kind of relatively old adage, garbage in, garbage out. We're seeing the same is true on the RL side, of getting quality evaluators to input how good your model is basically able to boost the performance of that model, of being able to capture high, kind of more granular and more accurate to your use case outputs. So if we think about a kind of traditional evaluation process where you might have a set of ground truths, you then run your model, and then you do a kind of blue or rouge kind of statistical comparison of your model output and see, how did my model perform compared to all of my gold standards? So we see this example here, right, where we say, I get a red apple in, and then does that compare with my output, and how does that compare with my ground truth sets? This is the standard way that teams would have been doing this previously, and purely using these statistical metrics limits you for handling edge cases and new cases that, when we're thinking about models that are being deployed in the real world, might not be represented in our ground truthing set. And so what we are presenting today, and at the end there'll be a link to a rubric paper that we've put together, is basically how we can go about building out these rubric-based evaluations. So this is an example of how we can provide a kind of evaluation criteria to humans to then fill out based on a specific output from our model. The three things that are true for any evaluation metric and are true for the traditional types that we were just discussing, and then these newer examples, is that we need a criteria. So what do we care about our model being able to do? What do we want our model to be able to do in practice? How expensive do we want it to be? How fast do we want it to be? Those pieces. Then there is the scoring of that side. So it's like, is that a numerical? Is that a binary? Is that subjective? And the third piece is the weighting. So it's the basically how much do we care about each of those different pieces, which might depend on our application and our model and our use case. So we have a criteria, a scoring, and then a weighting. So what we're looking at here is an example of a audio-to-speech model and some basically cases that we've seen and presented of evaluating the output of these models. So we can say fidelity to text. If we had a text input, audio output, is this good? Is this partial? Is this bad? Is it entirely wrong? And so we're kind of getting these three-piece scorings, and then we can also do the same for the formatting example below. And what we're seeing is that teams are basically leveraging this as a full loop, where when they are designing those kind of inputs for the model and the actual training architecture too, they will leverage the output as an evaluation, and then they will input this back as training data back at the start, either as an RL process, or they will see, okay, I have specific gaps that maybe I need to edit in my model architecture or anything else, or identify missing stages in my training data that I need to then supplement on a data collection side as well. So this is an iterative, repeatable process, and especially when we think about fine-tuned applications, and similar to Jonathan's previous talk, when we're talking about applying in different locations and different scenarios, then we need to be able to fine-tune for these aspects. Capturing relevant heuristics in relevant locations is just as important. So a few kind of practical examples, and this is actually taken from the Encord platform and showing how we can define these rubrics. So on the left-hand side, we have some examples of different classes that we can set up, and we can say, okay, if I have these two different videos, and you can see this is a still, basically, how well have these performed? How well has my model performed? And we can say, simply, is this one better on the left, better on the right? Or we can include more kind of hierarchical nestings to say, okay, if we consider this audio example, we might want to capture a wide range of these different metrics. And what a lot of teams are doing is leveraging these alongside their kind of business outcomes too. So for example, if we were taking this audio example and we had a customer helper system, it's like, was it able to deliver value to our client? Was it retrieving the information as aligns with the data source on my website? And that also links in with this case where we have kind of multiple different generative outputs, and we're seeing teams who are leveraging these kind of video and audio and making sure that we're dubbing correctly and that the audio is synchronized with the video. You can see this case where we can present a source of truth. So if there was a text prompt on the right-hand side or a social media source, are we generating audio that's actually truthful and aligned with these processes? And is there any inaccuracy or bias in there, like so? And again, when we were thinking about the security example, like, is my model outputting anything that would be offensive or harmful or inaccurate? And so basically, the speed at which we can iterate and develop in these generative applications depends on how quickly we can capture and how high quality the input is from our humans on these evaluation phases. So you can see here that we see teams who will input various different data formats, have their agent generate some sort of output, and then have that human validation, and then that feedback loop iterates through that process. One of the other stages that we're seeing teams doing as well as having these human captures, is using their own internal models as judges too. So by mandating a really kind of enforced rubric and building out this rubric in a structured way, you can then leverage other models that can evaluate your own and incorporate this into a human pipeline. One thing that is consistently true is that the teams that we work with will basically incorporate a human evaluator of that model as well. So there'll be some sort of human in the pipeline, But what decreases over time as the model quality improves is the amount of human review you're having to do. So as the evaluator gets better and the model itself improves, then you can basically extract those edge cases and your kind of long tail gets shorter. And so you can find those edge cases that then you need to pass to human review, whereas for the most part, the models will then review themselves. So there's a full report available at this QR code as well, where we go through a really nice example of going from this text-to-audio model and how we can build out a proper rubric for evaluating that and some of the metrics that we can pass through there. But otherwise, the framework that we wanted to present today was how teams are leveraging these human evaluators for building out GenAI apps for the real world. Thank you very much. I think similarly we have time for questions.
You had commented on red teaming, but didn't really talk to that much. And I guess like I've off and on kind of played with setting up a C2 MCP, and like I haven't seen many models push back with any guardrails. So I'm just curious, like, where is that?
I think it really depends on the specific application, but where we're seeing it a lot is in kind of more regulated industries when they're trying to build these applications, where a lot of them will be in a sort of prototyping phase internally, and they won't want to release anything until they'll have teams that will kind of basically build out these specific criteria that if a model is trying to output, they know what to flag and not what to avoid. One of the main use cases that we see come up is basically marking the success and the truth of a RAG output. So being able to correctly identify the source so that they have the auditability and traceability on those two.
So you're saying that guardrails are kind of an afterthought, or?
No, I think actually it's more that the guardrails are being put in place before a model is rolled into production, right? So it's like, so it's when you say you aren't seeing those, the customers that are then coming to us, they're saying we want to be able to flag these before anything gets rolled out.
Makes sense.
Any other questions?
So does Encord help with, let's say I'm able to evaluate basis a rubric and there is a certain model performance, does it help with helping me fine tune then, like trace back on was there something wrong with the training data, or do I have to tune the weights and biases? Like what do I do once I know it's a certain performance?
Yeah, so on the data side, we have some tooling for like managing those large kind of sources of data and finding those edge cases. But then on the actual model side and identifying those cases, we've actually partnered with Weights and Biases previously on being able to output these evaluations and structure that into your Weave dashboards or anything like that on Weights and Biases, where you can look at the specific model types and eval outputs depending on your data set as well.
Hey, I'm just curious, what's a good benchmark for the human evaluations? How many do you actually do to make sure that the humans are not making it wrong? And is it different across many different, like, is it different for text, video, or do you just trust one evaluation, or do you do 10 with 10 different people?
Yeah, I think it's, on that case, it depends on obviously like the scope of your model, right? If it's got a reasonably narrow scope, then you probably have fewer edge cases that you need to address on those sides as well. One thing that definitely that we're seeing as a trend is that combination of the human outputs along with the sort of business metrics like cost and time of inference and those kind of pieces too. But no, I'd have to come back to you for specific values on an individual model type. Maybe we can chat afterwards.
That's okay, I was just curious. Thank you.